Hello, I recorded people pretending other actively. And when I say people, I'm talking about people switching names into branch too. I'm talking about the locations of Weathersfield Police Department and the Britain Superior Court, Harford Courts, before the World Trade Center attack. I found out it was a bunch of ways tied to people with Connecticut's district court too. And people on at the state judicial branch offices, on at the state corrections offices. Increasingly collusion slash S with all natures of difference, exactly the way the breaching method employed that to be. Now, I'm using as definition of difference, not just what the dictionary says, but also how we have the same color eyes and we have different color eyes at the same time. But the same colors are white and black. And many of us use that alone as means to discern that not alone, but that alone in how we want to care about the Native Americans. And they tactically replace that by putting fear with the it was Native Americans and colonial people fought and early states people. But see, presidents like Native Americans were fighting with Native Americans, and a portion of them were our founders behind James Madison and his plan, which there was no one could counter it because it was perfected since some ancient times, since before modern religious messengers had to come about, because now the fact sheet nature is abridged, and if there wasn't roles with it, just like in colonial times, they offensively sense and discern. Increasingly, Harford Hospital has people with the Institute of Living. Now, if you see this, part of the reason they put me in fake conversations with doctors as a kid that weren't at all. I had no mental diagnosis. They're pretending I went as an adult because people I didn't know the name of, I found out. I never had a verbal conversation with them, but former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act, his co-defendants, his lawyer, and Harford Court's family members and their intimate ties before the World Trade Center attack in West Hartford locations. They had collusions with people intercities, not legitimately with training since they're kids or whatever they do, like with the Cologne Demorrow and people associated with the West Hartford locations, and like with the reported serial killer at the body dumping spot. In that person, I'm not saying he did those crimes or anything like that. I'm saying that person in that body dumping spot and the names next to it are involved, like a Justin Kovinskas. I never tried to contact him in my life. He's one of the ones who sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm all kinds of things. I barely know him. And in other words, he's all along Route 175. He has roles with Eric Jensen and Mark Carone and Kevin Carone, increasingly involved with Kerr families and ones with the name Perone, who have roles with people next to Fox Connecticut News with a church there, and with intelligence family, and the difference of their roles with child offenders, leaders of kids' first force. Even if that was made up, they're recorded and involved with predicate acts with facts, all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders. Also with foreign names use / us of that time collusions with them and overt criminal enterprises. And because there's also a worse, the roles with the breaching method. There are other names involved with our communications with ourselves. That's why they're faking and changing. The FBI has roles with New Britain Superior Court, with Harford Courts, sequence shifting with the FBI, and with people involved with upskirt pictures and use / us of them. Also involved with and as uses for their roles with using female, black and white female judges, taking them to collusions with all kinds of police forms, intercities, with New Britain Superior Court. Former director of the FBI's roles with a Detective Samuda. He might be switching his names because, in other words, he rolls with all these different police forms from intercities, from East Hartford to with ones with the name Scalora. There's police forging, switching names, making confessions, refusing to identify themselves legitimately, and worse, they forced the principal child offender before, and I've caught them doing worse with that. And they have the security involved with it, and they have it through years, and their family members. See the roles with the shopping centers and the malls. Get them on paper in one name and sequence. Why am I having you guys get the police on one name and sequence? Get them on paper here on mine, because on paper they put me to fake and change communications with themselves digitally as roles with it way worse than with the principal child offender upskirt nature is in prison for. And you hit his confessions and confirmations and what brought it up. Intercities, people involved with connected untimely deaths and their connections on my street, planting evidences, time. That's what brought up the school to me before I called the school. And I got arrested for harassment before, and that was when the principal was still being forced. And his Facebook page is rolls with the they're pretending they want privacy, and at the same time they're pretending they're trying to investigate things. These are people collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, all kinds of methods of sticking fake things in databases, fake motivations for it. They're not. These are people. They're with all kinds of natures of organized crime with the people, with the families, a whole bunch of families with the Institute of Living, personally involved with people with predicate acts from other areas on the streak of time for those reasons, because they're trying to hide live progressions, as the ones I caught on the campuses, putting fake things in databases, and they're trying to cover that up by planting evidences. So if we have a dispute, we have to get on paper, but they're refusing to identify themselves since I was a kid. Now all those police reports are connected, but they have a whole bunch of falsified police reports for the same arrest, and they pretend they make mistakes and keep switching names. They're playing games because before the World Trade Center attack, all this was recorded, and I was aware about it, even though I didn't know the people involved, like the people on Covington Street. I didn't even know them, but they were recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by involved with people from other areas tied to the intelligence families on my street with the names or people associated with the names Kalo and O'Brien, and their roles with mayors from Wethersfield. And people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, and confirmed involved with the World Trade Center attack, and with conscious use /s of the difference between the Saudis' collusions as attackers and as responders. Were the same way. Our side forced Saudis to roles at the same time. Scaloras. That's why one of the reasons they were right next to the World Trade Center. My Saudi friend wasn't there. These are people involved with the relations between Saudi Arabia and America through UConn, Trinity College, and Central Connecticut State University. And they didn't want to have roles with psychiatry. Increasingly, there's a Leahy family, and there was one named Lombardo, others tied to a Ray Kalal and a Joe DeMar. And then people associated with him, like named Chris Walters, people who raised them and with the intelligence community are criminally foreign influence with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, planting evidences, fake ties, fake natures of ties between people. And they're switching names into branch now to hide life progressions. The whole time they've been refusing to give me paper since I was a kid because they're leaving out the other names involved. And the breaching method, which nature itself shows us. And it's demonstrable how our founders sort of communicated this too. They communicated for us not to leave out what they declassified about what they said. Everyone wants to say, oh, what's the research say? Oh, but that's an expert. In other words, this breaching method keeps a number of people at locations, force the quality of fact-checking nature. No, we have black pupils and whites of eyes to discern that the nonsense of the integrity of the value of an expert. See, they have readings of statutes that give the benefit of the doubt at the last second, to the experts based on hierarchy and things. Those same people consciously force things to courts that there were collusions with predicate acts with facts, criminally foreign influence, fact, nature, quality aspects, and nature collusions. Nature as criminal insidiousness. I'm not even a lawyer. I'm not police force. I'm not criminal. I'm not a So they've been framing me since I was a kid. Increasingly, people tied to probate court judges, more than 3, are the ones involved with Two Rod Highway and Hang Dog Lane, with this Kalola family, and with this O'Brien family. Further, with child offenders, leaders of the kids, with one's name Kerr too, with also an officer Jerry Miller, planting evidence on all sides of my house. Also with a Inspector Mike, also involved with a Mike Delaferro, involved with they try to make fake exceptions of knowing me. In other words, I had no communications with him, even driving up to some fire department years ago. Mike Delaferro has brothers I don't even know the names of. I know Chris Delaferro, because his name was repeated to me. Same thing with the Mike Delaferro. And they try to make it, they time we do things. In other words, they're trying to make it look like they know me because they were planting evidences with probate court judges. Probate court judges that have roles with where elderly people are locked in elderly homes. They just don't let them leave. And they're about with a torture method. They have to do damage control. So you can't speak or any part of it. See, we're going to play about value the way nature uses value. Distinctly from ourselves. Not distinctly, but distinctly too. See, but we can't appreciate that because you guys are forbidding forgiveness. Then you want it. You have to have forgiveness for someone who's asking you to focus on these acts here. I'm talking about predicate acts. WFSB attached me to fake conversations about the World Trade Center attack. That's depressing, no. If it's not depressing, then you're weak. No. In other words, you fake conversations with people about things and changing things about World Trade Center. Before the World Trade Center attack, I did go to a doctor, in other words, and I had a very short conversation with him. And I asked him about, in other words, I didn't know the names yet. I know former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, a Thaddeus Grabowski, a Dominic Lepriata. They're the neighbors of a Dominic Lepriata. They have roles with names next to campuses, like next to a campus on the corner of Park Street and New Park Avenue in Hartford. Hartford courts and the FBI have roles with that family there. A girl, Emily or Amy, and how she switches her names. There was an officer who used the name. He said his name was Hunter. It's not Hunter, the president's son. Shout out to the president / chief / S, and to the incoming one. And note those 3 incompatible volumes, because nature's trying to show us what only increases as that aspect of ourselves. That is itself. But through its system, otherwise a special difference is forced from here. Leads of Hadith, spore, space, nature, transfer, per science, more probably and practically what ancient pantheism had been about, using Allah's name as a scientific value of the identity of the hypersimultaneous and using the Trinity. See those 3 parts of time, not just because of these 3 parts of time, but see those 3 parts of time, the extent of the past, was true always. There's an extent right now active, a whole bunch of things true, and and there's an extent of the future, like the seasons are to come, or they are value, even if they come or don't. Their value is increasingly here now. We know that. And we know there's more about the past, the future that we don't know. We know there's more before the extent of the past we know about that we know we don't know about. And we know there are active things now of truth that we don't know about. See, we have been by systems tactical terror from the ones of the ancients before the science became criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. Boxing is fought, but by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since some ancient times. And what that caused and keeps, it knew a breaching method knew that nature would demonstrate that too. While it knew nature would increasingly demonstrate to everyone. For example, search what is true always. It's saying to us, nature, think about what slavery was about. It's not saying that with words, it's saying, think about it. What was slavery about? One of the things it was true always about was a human fact keeping nature breaching method that had been entrenched before America's founders were born. Northern colonies and southern colonies, sickly distinctly, too. In other words, they had it sickly non-distinctly. They had slavery. When you examine what was actually recorded or discernible, it was against everyone. Fact, keeping nature, therefore physical too. But they had the black and white narrative, and leaving out, as they still have, how nature shows us black and white are the two colors that our species body of individual bodies has the same color at the same exact time. And then there are exceptions, well, we have different colors at the same time. While we have other species bodies that also have two eyes, quality aspects, nature, exceptions that come with demonstrations of the same thing, /S, which is its identity to the extent we can discern, which comes equally with its identity in relationship to itself, complete identity, that which won't change. The phenomenon of other being apparent is relative to Earth's a special difference, where its identity will only stay equally positive and negative to all parts of space/existence, except for where Earth has a special difference, where consciousness can be demonstrated to. And appreciation of the special difference of water, clean water. The special difference of not needing someone to have the excuse of needing money by destroying what makes positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. In other words, over who affords it. In other words, all that nonsense is in the way. You guys are preventing predicate acts with facts from being demonstrated. All those countries in the news are collusions here. There are people from all those countries in the news associated with the locations and the names involved at Trinity College, at their homes still. Like people associated with the Dr. Shub and his family members. There are a whole bunch of people that know my names. I don't know their name. His neighbor is off Kitts Lane in Newington. In other words, there are a whole bunch of police departments involved with the house/S near me, involved then and now further with the principal child offender. And it's nothing personal. They're involved with people that I don't know their names of, but I can't go seek it through them. I'm not going to. People I don't even have conversations with. Just they're trying to pretend other. They already pretended other with the police phones. They pretended through the news media too that I had conversations with the police as a kid, and they never were. In other words, the kids that did go down to the police station and have a conversation with them, they planted them, and they planted fake, and they changed natures of ties to me to other kids and fake motivations for it because they have a whole bunch of different countries, and we're involved with the ones who keep showing their recorded roles with you/S conscious of the fake things in databases. I recorded Tide. No one, in other words, and you're making me give it away too. You guys are stealing my intellectual property rights and means to speak about things like this, for example. In other words, because this is not just against me. You guys planted evidence at each campus I went to. They're trying to fake type. Ray Reynolds will tell you himself In other words, they put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me on off that grammar school, on off that kindergarten class I had. These are people that live next to a there's names next to a Montessori school I went, grade school. In other words, the only thing I regret is what I did. I set on my mind, okay, don't show it. But then at the last second, the hardest you've ever cried to not, when you're a little kid at that age, and you cry to make not what I want to do something. In other words, I prepared to do it as hard as I could. And then with the lady was right there to catch me doing that, but then I just tried to do it anyway. I don't know. Then I gave up, and then when it was all right, And then that was so that was many years ago. But then the next year I came to my own town because that was only for 1 year. I thought we thought it was going to be more, but it was they only do kindergarten. But there's names next to that campus involved with there's a Christina Sioka, and there's the name Mendez. There are Mendez police involved with the FBI and other agencies next to Fox Connecticut News, and their roles with the buildings. And I never had a conversation in my life, or no, a word of conversation with one that's reportedly named Allegra, with one of the buildings there associated with the Mendez. And there's the Chet Casper. I never had a word of conversation with him in my life, Chet Casper. Increasingly, people make confessions for him and for the FBI director involved with him, and with the mayors involved with them, with other countries too at the same time. And they non-verbally confirm and demonstrate things. He has roles right about the time of the reported Greg Kyler shooting, or murdered or whatever. In other words, I'm not using any of that evidence or even saying it happened or didn't happen, by the way, because they were the courts and the FBI before that and before the World Trade Center attack. They found out what I was trying to show is recorded, and they don't know the extent themselves, because they are constantly being and having been used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. For example, like with their treatments of the reason there are gangs in New York City is because people are unsafe, and the police are collusion /S, all exception nature too, because there are other names involved. But everything that demonstrates that, nature's demonstrations of it, you guys have the breaching method employed through you guys, forcing it to be blamed on other things, others, or selves. Like racism. Racism is not what true always. Like a human fact, human nature breaching method is true always what caused slavery. Not racism. It wanted and needs it to be the things to be, in other words. But that's debatable. That's not, things to appear to be debatable that are not. And then we stay with that, and we don't get on we leave the point. In other words, this is about a predicate acts with facts method. If you want to care for the people hurt most by that, especially, you don't come off this subject, because it also has the suburbs were tactically denatured before America's founders were born, and they had no free speech. And the nature of debate regarding it, the only reason they get away with it is relative to criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw fact, treatment, nature, quality aspects in nature that each of the sciences have. Each of the sciences names, names of the people of the sciences, as a certain type of victim /hyper victim, that the value of forgiveness is relevant for. In other words, we're supposed to be paying attention to the identity that no one could make up. The one that is hyper simultaneous. And I was using the word hyper simultaneous and hyper hyper simultaneous, way before I heard of hypersonic missiles. In other words, I'm using it to describe that identity is not the other species' bodies. It's not our species' body, but it is anyway. It's the rest of its complete identity completing itself. Staying connected while not. Because in other words, the parts of our body, the parts of someone's body is a semi-nature relationship to their whole complete identity, which stays connected to them. Or they are not, or that part is not. See, but we have not been appreciation of positive and negative. Nature shows us to discern the difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positives and negatives. I mean, in other words, not just negatives. Because this breaching method is recorded, what's actually recorded the values of history, their voices, natures, in other words, as I would still glorify, because you guys have replaced, again, you have roles not realized, but by the breaching method, which shows other people to realize it. In other words, use of our founders' words, what they said, leaving out what they declassified about it, and leaving out what nature itself demonstrates. And exploiting consciously the distinction between our founders and the presidents. One could say, oh, well, if you're a first president, you're a founder. Or if you're a second president, you're a founder. You know what I mean? First of all, those two are different. See, every detail is important. No one even allows anyone to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. And while they're not allowing it, one could discern how they have criminally foreign influence, faction, nature, quality, aspects, nature, and delusions that would not have been, and it would not be if had American history been taught right. And this breaching method knew that we would discern that. And so it has it. This is in other words, all natures of employment. First of all, we have been charging ourselves for what we don't need. And if the whole species has negative value nature progressions, acts in nature is caused by things that we all could agree. In other words, we have the suburbs, let alone the cities. The cities were only allowed to unfold that way, by the way. Already, in other words, there are homes that were built before America's founders were even born. And through their lifetimes, they had no free speech. That's one of the things they communicated for us to get straight. And they declassified it. Nature did too. They had to force the other founders to be. And otherwise they would have been in such trouble, even worse trouble, because everyone was afraid to get in trouble. Not to get in trouble. I mean, that's obvious, but what they were afraid of more than, that's obvious, when there's research like that. But I'm saying what they're afraid of is how this breaching method would use the algorithm /S method since before computers, where each name is a database identity of relativity. And the name of the republic for which we stand itself, but as one that, before it became criminally foreign influenced, appreciated. In other words, it's led by the hyper invisible but still discernible, and you have to use the invisible but still discernible to get to the parts of the hyper invisible but still discernible, per the method of pantheism. To cause evolution's fruits and gifts and means out of nowhere, its way, which is everywhere at once, or we sense. And even if that happens when we sense, we're happy because then we can make it show a different way. It shows us how to make, in other words, you have to appreciate the ground, its identity relationship. This is what Native Americans have been trying to say. But see, they're still consciously, the difference between Native Americans and people who are citizens but not Americans, and people who know about and learn about America who are not even citizens. Those differences are used by the breaching method that measures and maintains that no one could discern the three volumes of America's founders the way it understands them. It was set up to measure and maintain and to sense which group and or which area or which person would go against those laws, or would in other words, and way that way. No, for example, I learned in notes at Central Connecticut State University that there were laws that it was highly criminal to even have been found out if you heard someone speaking about building homes outside of internationally monitored conversations. They would torture that person that went around them. It was a fact-shipping nature, therefore physical slavery of every single person. And it was a differences racketeering method, worse than war crimes, sustained specifically to hide behind, and to increasingly hide behind what it knew that and knows that nature would increasingly demonstrate to us. Again, for example, with the value of a human fact-shipping nature breaching method as one of the things that nature itself shows us is one of the things that is true always, that what slavery was about. It was about a human fact-shipping nature, torture, extortion, slavery method, three ways manifest because of how the Trinity, the complete identity of the extent of the complete identity we have that of all space/existence. We only have an extent of its complete identity we could discern, but it comes with equally value with that subject treatment as with the truth /s as any subject individually grouped it together. Every part of that has three identities of possession over it, distinctly from five, and the value of that is differentially valuable relative to the identity of hyperrelativity. By the way, too, there is in other words, how we are a species body, distinct from the other species bodies, but also simultaneously non-distinct, and then further by that hyper simultaneously. Again, that like we have those quality aspects in nature: distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous. But they didn't invent some things, and we didn't invent some things. Most things, everything. We are only hyper additionally. In other words, where more and more it makes more and more of its identity a forever nature through temporary /lasting space nature is what nature itself demonstrates us as most probable and is demonstrably being demonstrated to us that way. See, but we have this breaching method having employed use /s of theories and of a nature of the research locations like Quinnipiac University has roles with prosecutors and judges and their family members who have roles with a whole bunch of different countries, with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced, involved too, increasingly live progressions from that and from other natures of things to other locations. See, this breaching method knew that it could get everyone to collusion and sustain collusions with what they didn't want for a while. And that would cause negative value nature progressions, acts in nature. They could get them to blame other things, others, themselves for a while. While it was doing that, it's making more and more self-value rules will cover up with that. With the database relationships which no one wanted collusions with it simultaneously at the same time, but then everyone, in other words, criminally re-engineered. And then that could no longer afford more and more what nature, their function by nature revealed, the republic for which we stand. Nature unabridged. Abridged nature is value as criminal insidiousness. I am not a lawyer, I'm not a police form, I'm not a judge, but it is time, black pupils. In other words, we have been systems A through Z, tactical ulterior from the one that is also positive unto itself, the hypernative pure one. This breaching method measures and maintains that no one could discern the three identities of our founders like it could, because it wants to sabotage everyone. The first volume of our founders are the Native Americans. The second is James Madison and our founders behind them, and grouped with the Native Americans as the Native Americans, as that seeking to get the Constitution unabridged, as that hyper-native system. That itself, nature itself shows us the value of Native Americans. But it also shows, it shows us with its relationship to its differential where A through Z is being and having been used through systems abridged, where every difference is being and having been assigned and spoken about exactly the way the breaching method needed and needs, leaving itself out. Even if it's not a standing hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, it is a standing identity of negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures, identity of relativity. And in other words, and also to other things, others ourselves, in place, being blamed for things our founders communicated for us to blame on that human factory nature breaching method. The one that had them have to lie about their actual motivations. That the same exact way, because the breaching method needed too, because everything the breaching method needed and does, it does the opposite too, because it needs to keep its hyperforensic trail. It's the hyperforensic demonstrations of itself, so to speak. I'll whisper Greek. In other words, from being discerned. Not one has learned. That's why no one has heard the fact that we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and breaching method assigned other roles communicating other with it. Otherwise, that body was sensed, including if it was a majority of people, that body, including if it was everybody. So here again, the phrase, the body of Christ. Because this is about ancient pantheism. It is nature itself is showing us, the identity of nature itself is showing us how it is functional. How it is a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. And so we'll address this and this is what the parts of speech, the parts of speech of the languages are about the invisible but still discernible, and their / conjunction with the hyper invisible but still discernible. Allah. Except when that, in other words, that's all when that part is being discerned wrong. And the Trinity, in other words, we'll get into it, is more probable and practical relative to recorded self-valued use /s of others also self-valued. Self-value use of the information of criminally foreign influence databases that most of us know simultaneously were criminally foreign influence. There was slavery in trades north and south. There were people there still are people wearing suits and ties, encounters and exceptions who the only way they could get away with that with the debate is relative to having to self-value too. The suburbs from America to Russia to Ukraine, they were designed for a torture, extortion, slavery method. The only one, if anyone wants to debate that, they'll have quality aspects and fact human nature itself as criminal insidious nature, with nature demonstrating it. They had slavery entrenched, north and south. When people say, "Oh, it was the money was it was either because they read books that say that the money was the tea tax." Meanwhile, there was slavery entrenched. In other words, it wasn't a tea tax. That it was James Madison's plan, and the founders behind him. In other words, no, everyone was still. In other words, there are proofs that they didn't have slaves. They had to hide their actual identities, so fake those identities with slaves, and they would want us to figure that out. But you guys are self-valued roles with uses of their words, self-valuing, leaving out what they declassify for us to about that. We're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged. We're supposed to appreciate how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list. That's why they're interbranch forging names, switching names. They recorded themselves inside and outside of courts beforehand, preemptively. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought readings of statutes, precedent, and value. Yeah. In other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence, please. Yeah. In other words, WFSB is in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, and they will not fix the fake news. In other words, I apologize for what I did. In other words, and they framed me because I caught them with a whole bunch of things at once. Because intercities, had people planting evidence where I went because they play this game where people increasingly, the intelligence community knows people are punks for what they tell them when they lie. They use the right to lie where they don't. And they have time collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, the same ones. Originally, still, a whole bunch of different countries at the campuses together. There are judges' family members and prosecutors' family members involved with people all along Route 3, involved with the same house near me that is involved with those places, has something to do with 3 spots at the end of the Berlin Turnpike and the people at the campuses that are putting fake and changed evidences at campuses so they could keep covering up how they used, because while they're being used remotely, they're shown needs to cover up how they used location/S and pretended for the breaching method it looked like other things until it was true. Even while it was true too, like greed and things like that. That's not their motive. In other words, their motives to examine that you have to be a nature that can follow mandated law. You have to get me off the fake conversations with WFSB about the World Trade Center attack and their sequence ships. They faked conversations with me, with themselves, and with others. And that also have been, in other words, a whole bunch of people at once. And these are a whole bunch of people I never had conversations with, and the ones forging names of doctors, and some of them as doctors, who have a whole bunch of people with their families who planted evidence on my street when I was a kid and then as an adult. Faked exceptions, fake ties to me, and roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw. Whole bunch of people with the World Trade Center tied to all those. In other words, there's a Dean LaPointe, and people associated with. I don't know them. It's all like people associated with Mark Carone, Kevin Carone at Central Connecticut State University. They have some FBI and state police families in New Britain, Connecticut, involved with Rocky Hill and Wethersfield, and the spots next to Fox Connecticut News has their social media. The social media of New Britain Superior Court is involved with sequence shifts with the people before the World Trade Center attack, who were involved after it with them. Just before Facebook what was founded, they have roles with people with inter campuses, inter cities, interstates, internationally, because there's also hyper internationally here, which is discernible too. But so you guys keep are fishing for what I say to use to hide the predicate acts of the news and of the police and courts that have faked World Trade Center attack information and collusions with it, self value. In other words, you guys are fake sides too, because you had time collusions forcing the Saudis collusions with you, with the people on Valley Crest and Weathersfield. They were recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people with the name Scalora too, and there are people with the name there's a schedule family with a conjunction to that street that I never had a conversation with verbally. In other words, there was a girl that they have roles with I don't even know their names. They know my name. They have roles with the probate court judges' family members, planting evidences with people, intercities, and with the one FBI director Robert Luskin involved with the houses on that street. There's a Finelli family. There's people with the name Finelli. We never had a conversation with them. One of them tried to pretend made a fake exception that shows the same thing, because what he did pretend that we communicate was other than he did. He was involved with frauds and people involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones for his neighbors, the Moros, involved with the confessions of the Saudis, repeated about their ties to Claudia Scalora said that told my Saudi friend that she had sex with her cousin Joe DeMoro. And there's another Joe DeMoro, also from Rocky Hill, but he's also at Central Connecticut State University with the one from Weathersfield with the John DeMoro, and a Paul DeMoro involved with police forms, intercities, interstates, and with wire crime acts and methods, identity theft, fraud, sequence shifts. In other words, I never had a class with Joe DeMoro either. There's a Mr. Pruzzi who planted a fake exception of me knowing him one day. And I had no communications with anyone else in that class that year either. In other words, Mr. Pruzzi has roles with increasingly with people with my fourth grade class and with my sixth grade class who had conversations with people in the other class. One of the teachers, we used to live a street over from me. And he had family members increasingly involved with these games, with the ones like with this name O'Brien. I never had a class with them at that school or any school. So they're increasingly. I barely know them. They took the they've been for wire crimes and putting fake evidences with multiple police departments and multiple child defenders. Increasingly, people tied to them, and their roles even after they left to be timed. The instances here were timed to headline progressions, intercities. They pretend people can't speak right. That has something to do with their roles with a whole bunch of people names with the intelligence community and the names next to Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University, pretending they're unmarked police forms or whatever. People associated with Subby Bajario. He sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He has roles with people. He stole as collusions with with a Judge Smith and some intelligence at the state capitol next to it, involved with the military and people on Elm Streets and Rocky Hill and Weathersfield, and off the judicial branch and corrections offices, and all sides of the on the community center in Old Weathersfield. They have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, federal evidences crime, child offenders. They have medical offenders, foreign and domestic, overt criminal enterprise, legitimately people with unmarked police forms. These are also people with the news, putting fake things with the news and planting evidences at corners of the streets and next to the campuses. And I want a response to the principal child defender's confessions to me. And part of it involves them recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They're increasingly attaching everyone to fake conversations and changed communications with everyone around them and forcing them to self-value collusions with the interbranch that are collusions here since I was a kid. Now you guys are really fishing for means to bring more things before courts, criminally foreign influence. You're lying about your motivations too. You even put fake things in the fake conversation transcripts and databases and through the mail and through the wire. You have Judge Napolitano. Please do what's right and get them on paper, one name in sequence. A whole bunch of people next to Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut, have roles with the community center, and the names next to them, like a sub-Iberia, like he's involved with the principal child offender further, with the names with it, and a subby scalora. A subby scalora is also brought up by the Robert Rodriguez, who's involved all along Route 3 with the state judicial branch, increasingly with state police and Whiting Forensics, with the same houses with wire crimes with them, and with people intercities planting evidences on my street, rolls with the houses with wire crimes with the Wethersfield police, switching and forging names with the courts. Vaccines. Get them on paper, one name in sequence. It's nothing personal. Don't pretend that either, because you know there are a whole bunch of countries involved, and I don't want to use their names because I have the same problems there too. And we're going to get there's overt criminal enterprises involved too. But that will come up when we deal up with them planting evidences with them. A whole bunch of people tied to a former police chief, Cintron, and a Mazzucato bakery involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, putting fake evidences all along Route 175 and Route 3, and with Whiting Forensics and state police, families, interstate, people with a whole bunch of people at Trinity College involved with this, with them, identity theft, fraud, slander, putting evidence on there. No, I don't know Eric Olson, Matt Olson, and their roles with this Neville family has something to do with their roles all along Route 3 and Cromwell, and with social media too. The FBI and CIA and these other countries are involved with they're making confessions here because they're not responding. Their silence is also leaking. So they have, and also the Christina Kazmarek. I know how to pronounce that name, from Eric Jensen, who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, also has roles with state police and planting evidences on my campuses with people named Zeno through time, and the timing of it, and the locations on the campuses. In other words, these are people interstates involved with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw identity racketeering roles too. The difference of, in other words, this little greaseball, I don't know him. In other words, and he couldn't have an honest conversation to represent Italy, and they move as families. I don't even know all their names. In other words, and some of them, like the name Joshua Julian, I just know his name because his name was repeated to me by the Mark Violet as one of the many people at Hartford Hospital involved with digital and sexual and medical offenders of kids with overt criminal enterprises. Their patients and criminals, fire departments, families, they all run into high life progressions there, and they fake and change what's actually recorded just because there's recording things, but they're putting forth fake reality, fake transcripts, and they put it through the mail. These are people involved increasingly with the World Trade Center attack. So increasingly, in other words, West Hartford too. The FBI director put fake things in databases with some time. In other words, a Joe DeMore and a Ray Clow sought me out to make a fake exception of knowing me in West Hartford years ago at some place there used to be a whale there. I don't know what it was. In other words, someone, because they've been planting evidences intercities. They have Glastonbury locations, people with the name and tied to the name Scalora involved with the FBI and other agencies, and the people that force Saudis to collusions with them, with the courts, intercities and interstates, per their cousins too, as the ones with the wire crimes with the Wethersfield police refusing to identify themselves. Where do the Scaloras live? There are other Scaloras that live in Wethersfield. In other words, let's get them on paper, one name in sequence. These are interstates, people involved also internationally, but also further hyper internationally, what is actually recorded. You guys want to make things pretend they're debatable that are not, and keep that going away, because that's why you can't deal with the predicate acts. Honestly, you guys are obligated now to get the interbranch on paper, one name in sequence. Whole bunch of people, I don't care. In other words, get them on paper. A whole bunch of countries should do this at the same time. I'll show you how to fix the countries, the suits and ties, the counter's exceptions that have left out the predicate acts with facts method that we can discern clearer than day. Black pupils, gather, peer, you too. We go like this. We be forced the quality of fact treatment nature from out here. In other words, Judge Napolitano will help us. You got to force him or someone to respond so I can show you how the other countries are involved. Increasingly, people associated with they said, with Julie Mancuso, too. I never met Julie Mancuso. Had something to do with the people with the science classes, too. And the different, the difference, that's why the 2 times I had a cooking class, the 2 times I had speech class, so they play with the sense and sensibilities of everyone. They're making them high lipoaggressions. You guys should not have hid what I recorded when I first was coming in there, when I caught you guys recording fake things too. In other words, you little rat holes. You want to be called rats because in other words, you're screening the foreign name. And then you make it look like we're guilty of something. In other words, I had nothing to do with. There's people with Providence, Rhode Island, tied to the Mayano and his narrative, and the people tied to Mike Pandolf, too, increasingly. In other words, interstates, people with Puerto Rico tied to this police chief Cintron, and people with the name Cintron involved with the intelligence community at Sandy Hook, Newtown. They have roles with abuses of kids. And they're little cowards. They won't get on paper. Get them on paper, because there's no conspiracy theory. We're going to go with the predicate acts, and there's no difference between the Republican and Democrat. You guys are sick. Get on paper. Follow names. Follow law. Mandated law. Someone tell Judge Napolitano for me. I can't reach him. Please get them to get them on paper. One name in sequence. I told you I don't know all the names, all the people. But they bring them in. I know how they're doing it with the description of nothing paranoid. They want to change what I say. I'm not going to. In other words, I told you that people with violence involved and with weapons, even with poison, and you have Hartford Hospital with the fire departments, increasingly involved with inspectors, involved with smoke that came backwards through my chimney one time with this. And the people involved with as the father of the girl who of a Jewish girl reportedly of Miss Riley repeated about how she was sexual things about her with a Domain family, who was also involved with a kid that sat behind him, Anthony Yagman, who's further involved with them with the child offender principal and other child abusers, leaders of kids intercities, connected through time too. People's connected to them, have time collusions with these people, has something to do with their roles with the buildings next to Fox Connecticut News, which I know about that too better than they do some ways. In other ways, even though I don't know nothing about that declassified or whatever, they have roles with systems criminally influenced. They fabricate transcripts of phones, conversations with the police. Then they had the high lipoaggressions. Increasingly, people tied to Chris Walters are involved with wire crimes in Wethersfield Police, and in other words, and they attach him and me to fake ties, fake natures of ties to each other. Increasingly, their roles doing that through time. Increasingly, Charlie Bose is involved with people named Mendez who demonstrate. I didn't ask them, I never had a conversation with them. I made the exception was when he made an exception. The only time I ever saw him on a campus in my life was real quick in a Mr. Potter's class, who I found out he's one of the guys at the state judicial branch offices involved with conversations with people tied to named Casper, who have been planting evidences with people all along Route 175 in the conjunctions to it, like Ridge Road, people associated with the Mazzucato and those Mazzucato Bakery, where it is now in Rocky Hill, and where it used to be, but where it is now in Rocky Hill from years before where it was there. That police chief, Cintron, his daughter, and people associated with Reno Mazzucato were involved with predicate acts with facts there and putting fake things in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me with a whole bunch of different countries at the same time, and their own against their own. These are the people who then pretend to be against pray. These are people who pretend they could speak for law, and, so we have the experts on everything that speak for exactly where the breaching method made them experts. Meanwhile, the little kid in New York City could discern clearer than that there are delusions and there are criminally foreign influence, backstream nature, quiet aspects of nature, to the best of them. Speaking for the law. How are you? In other words, there was World Trade Center predicate acts, and after it too, with the same people involved. WFSB in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, has rules with people named Scalora. A whole bunch of people tied to the name Scalora. Intercities has rules with them leading up to the World Trade Center attack in New York City, as people involved with Washington, D.C. and a whole bunch of different countries, and with the international business with Central Connecticut State University has the departments individually grouped and together. Recorded use, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. From off the campuses, though, certain type of victim / hyper victim. Whole bunch of intelligence tied to a former Mr. Jack Heitner and his roles with the Sam. It might be his brother. I don't know if it looks like him. I don't want to say where. People, all the conjunctions off Main Street, in other words. And places associated with George Washington. You guys are not allowing the Wadsworth Athenaeum. So these are people involved with the Saudi Arabia in the attack, though. It might be. It looked. I don't know if it is him. I don't even know his name. With the Wadsworth Athenaeum. Looks like a guy named Sam, who used to be associated with a Mr. Jack Heitner. And has rules with has a Saudi friend who became my friend, and her friend is involved with multiple child abusers, leaders of kids, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and they're not legitimately where and how they have roles with acting professors, and the fact that there's probably unmarked police forms out there. See, but the integrity of the police. Originally and still, when it comes to the phenomenon of them being identities of the law, or the fact that law is written, they're leaving out all that's actually written and recorded. In other words, and priority first. These are people that have been sticking, have been self-value roles with predicate acts with facts that we're going to be paying attention to, because we discerned them when we were kids, but we were trained to blame them on other things, others ourselves. What nature told us first to refer to, in other words, nature shows us to refer to it as predicate acts with facts roles, replacing what nature communicates also positive onto itself with white and black, the colors we have that are the same color eyes. And with the breaching method having been left out too. See, all three are left out. The breaching method, the fact that we have white, the same color eyes, and they are white and black, and the value of it is denied. See, but anyone denies it, they can't do it on paper, so they have to properly, relative to how the person who has the rights that are too numerous to list and who has the business needs. In other words, they want us to make subject framings of their way, leaving out what their criminally foreign influence, uses of those locations. New Britain Superior Court and Hartford Courts and Connecticut's District Court has rules of people on Elm Streets in Wethersfield and Rocky Hill through time who have been stacking predicate acts with facts between campuses, inter-campuses and intra-campuses. John DeMoro, I only know him, barely. In other words, he's a part of the confessions of my fifth grade teacher, Mr. Pruzzi, who people, kids from before I was in fifth grade and after, they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are people from Central Connecticut State University, New Britain, Connecticut, that have been planting identity theft, fraud, slanders, and roles with predicate acts and child abuse, identity theft, fraud, slander, sabotage, all kinds of sick and medical corruption with kids. They have female and male doctors, and they have female judges even involved. They have female black and white judges, white for the, them, because they don't know how to speak about it yet, because they left out the breaching method. They left out the predicate acts. They force it left out. We don't have to be lawyers to be able to discern. We're going to show how nature itself shows us how nature's identity has the predicate of English and the predicate act of the law, both with demonstration /S of how it is functional, being distinctly hyper invisible but still discernible, and the way it is. Okay, so everyone's gone. What did you say? Thank you for people. Oh, World Trade Center Predicate Act. So please tell me who disbelieves what I said about the World Trade Center Predicate Acts and the rest of the stuff. They brought all these murders, untimely deaths, and natures of organized crime acts with facts and identifiable thefts and frauds up at the same time intercities. Has a whole bunch of people with conjunctions to Two Rod Highway and Hangdog, where it runs into Hangdog Lane, and the all natures of conjunction to that and to that, like Route 3 and the Berlin Turnpike, have roles with, like, on off the state judicial branch offices. They also have wire crimes with Wethersfield Pizza. I never saw a Maria Pizzino on a Wethersfield campus in my life. And one class I had with a Stephen Stocko, I never saw him outside of class, and I never had one word of communications with him the whole class. Paul Zano and Ray Clough were placed in that class, and they were influenced to harass him the whole time, because the same rate by people associated also with the name Lombardo, with some foreign and domestic medical families, with wire and mail crimes here, and roles with some untimely deaths in the past. Now, these are people that have roles, whether they make it up or not. They have roles with the Harvard Hospital and Yukon Intelligence, with the drugs and medicines and the unmarked police forms and all the elements of that are involved with identity theft, pretending that's their motives for it. In other words, they have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought readings of statutes and precedents. They have lawyers involved too, playing with it. Trantola, I don't know where they went to school, but all these campuses are sick. Fake branches stick. Prepare to fall. Build wall. Shout out by the way, shout out to Mexico. I will not forget. In other words, I will not forget your neighbors. But in other words, when I say build wall, we are all going to want this, and we're going to make a plan, because the whole species wants things. We have YouTube. We can make things fathomed by leaders and by people at the same time that no one thought were fathomable. We have to pay attention to, there's a difference between making positives out of negatives and making hyper positive out of negatives. Or in other words, and you say, oh, because there's no such thing as a hyper positive. If there's, what shows that's not true, in other words, is that there's a difference between making criminal and insidiousness natures of positives out of negatives. Because that's all that we've had since some ancient times. Because you guys have not appreciated properly our founders' communications, because you have had a breaching method used self-valued roles with its telling of American history, using what they said, leaving out what they declassified, using it to sense self-valued collusions, and people that are going to sense other and use those styles of fact tribute nature. It's not even debatable. The predicate acts with facts is one of the things too that is true always that slavery was about, where even like racism is not. Even the breaching method employed, even though the breaching method did employ that as racism, everyone was possessed by it. And our founders had to hide what they really did. And they declassified this. It wasn't about a T-tax. Get axe. CT, it has not been felled. CT must be the cherry tree vaccines. So Jack Heidner also has roles with New York City, with others, and from a whole bunch of people from Wethersfield have roles with New York City and Central Connecticut State University and next to Trinity College. And their roles with the ones with wire crimes of the Wethersfield police, switching and forging names of retired police chiefs involved with their intimate families and ties to them. Also, wire crime, timed collusion /S. Let's get them on. I tell Beth, they even on digital media, this is recorded, and in the form of them pretending others recorded digitally. You fear God, please get them on paper. And you know what they do on a mass scale? They know they were shown they were doing it. A gentleman at locations will warn people they will hurt them when they're aware of how people are using other people's when they bring up subjects like relative to the fake conversations with me that the police and the courts pretended intercities. I didn't even tell them I know about the murders and things involved. Intercities connected, timed of it too. Even if it was all made up, because they have the right to lie. In other words, it's recorded that they've been using such, summaries of the law with a leafed out exceptions, exception nature. In other words, it's like they did when they speak about what witch trials are about, let alone what Jim Crow laws are about. You guys still don't have the sophistication to speak about what Jim Crow's laws are about. You don't know what that first thing. To understand what Jim Crow laws are about, you have to understand James Madison, the founders behind him, and the three natures of founders. And the third nature of founders were those historic, they forced to be founders. And that's grouped Native American too. Ugh. But there is that Native hyper chief. In other words, there is a value reason why there's president /chief. It's not because it's just a cool slogan. Although I'm for the slogans because it helped me figure this out. In other words, people appreciate Native American, and we have to bring the arts and tell the history better. So they tried to scare off with the natural love of A through Z, but the natural way, with the old westerns and things like that. Yeah, when you hear them pretend that they could speak for law or justice or inclusion. Why is there no inclusion? Look at the cities people stacked upon. Vaccines. We parse through things. We prepare. Who disbelieves? Who disbelieves?